This video is about what to do during post-occupancy settlement agreements, also known as rentbacks. But my friend here, Karen Daly, an attorney with Ekko Title at One Loudon, Ashburn, and Middleburg, doesn't want me to call these things rentbacks. So we're going to get to some stories to share with you guys. All right, my name is Chrissy Goodrum. I am a compliance broker with Hunt Country Sotheby's International Realty, and I'm also a realtor, so I sell homes. And so, Karen, we've had a few transactions with these post-occupancy settlement agreements,
right.
Where we've seen the seller has moved out and the buyer has said nothing about any problems. They come back, there's no problems. But it was difficult then for the seller to get their money back from the title company, like their security deposit. So I understand our contracts in Northern Virginia have changed. So what's going on? Share with everyone this, so people can get their money back from buyers after they move in.
Oh yes, so this is actually pretty common, and it was very frustrating pre-January 1, 2023 to get a security deposit back when the buyer didn't do anything. And so what the forms committee did is they changed the language in the contract. And so now there's what I like to call a trigger mechanism. So if something doesn't happen, then this happens. So the contract says that if the escrow agent doesn't receive this list of problems from the buyer, they use the word deficiencies, but we'll say problems, then the escrow agent is instructed to send that security deposit back to the seller.
Okay, that's awesome if you're representing the seller.
Exactly. So the other thing I do too is when I get the paperwork and I see these escrow agreements, and if it doesn't match what the contract says, I strike it out and I refer back to the contract, because now it's so clear what the settlement agent is supposed to do with that security deposit.
Wonderful. All right. Scenario two, we've seen in the past, for example, I've represented sellers who agree to a post-occupancy settlement agreement. Say they close on like June 30th, and maybe they think they need 30 days to still live in their house while they wait for their next house to be ready. But hey, lo and behold, magical things happen and they're ready to go before the 30 days is up. So is there any way they can get their money back if they've agreed to like a flat amount or daily amount? And also, what about utilities? If they've said they're going to pay for utilities for a month, what happens?
So those are good questions. So the first question, do they get a refund back of that portion that they no longer need to use?
Yeah.
Right? It's basically 10 days. And that will depend on how the contract was filled out when it was signed.
Okay.
So there's a box that's checked, and it either says buyer will or will not give a refund back to the seller if they decide to leave early. So you're going to look to that to see if they get a refund. And if they do get a refund, that comes directly from the buyer.
Okay.
It does not come from the title company, so they have to work with the buyer on that.
Okay, so kind of key takeaway is it's important to anticipate that this might happen. So you write it out, you negotiate it ahead of time as opposed to after the fact.
Exactly. The second part of your question, responsibility for the utilities. So prior to January 1, 2023, the contract was silent on this. They have now changed it. So the default is that if the seller leaves early, so that they're there for 30 days, but they leave on day 20, the seller still remains responsible not only for the utilities, but also the condition and maintenance of the property, which can kind of be a big deal if something happens during that 10-day period before the buyer comes in and takes the property. So there is a solution though.
Okay.
Love solutions, right? So the solution is that the buyer and the seller can agree in writing that when the seller vacates on day 20, then the buyer will take over the maintenance condition and the utilities for the property.
Awesome. All right. Next question or scenario. We've seen where your idea of something being clean and my idea being something clean, two different ideas. All right. So the contract says for post-occupancy agreements that the seller is supposed to leave the premises broom clean. And so they're supposed to remove trash.
Right.
What happens now if the seller doesn't leave the place broom clean and leaves trash and, the garage full of stuff or the shed full of stuff?
Right.
What can the buyer do?
So that will depend on how the contract was negotiated. It depends. It's always my my default answer. But really, in the contract, there's actually some language that you could put in. So say a seller wants to just sell the property as is. They don't want to be responsible for cleaning out the trash. Maybe the person was a hoarder, who knows. So you want to make sure as a seller, if that's what you want to do, that you include that language in the contract. And then buyer, if you are buying the property and there's a post-settlement occupancy afterwards, that if that language has been included in the contract, then you're kind of stuck, unfortunately. Okay. If not, probably the buyer and the seller, need to work to see how do they get that out. Either the buyer is hiring someone to clear out the property and the seller reimburses them, or maybe the agents, come together and come up with the solution.
And just kind of question, this happened on one of my deals last year. What if the buyer isn't around to verify that the property is broom clean? Like maybe they're on vacation or they are living in another state. How long do they get to verify that this place is broom clean or is up to their standards?
So they get 3 business days after the seller vacates the property.
Okay, so for planning purposes, that's kind of important.
It is.
Make sure you're at the property looking at it, because if a week goes by, you're out of luck.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. I understand that during COVID, way back when that happened,
yes,
no longer here,
yeah.
You got a call from an agent. The scenario was it had been raining really hard, and their client was the person that sold the property. They were still living in it after settlement in a post-occupancy settlement agreement, and it was raining really, really hard. Right. Obviously, they weren't in control of the weather.
Right.
But the basement ended up flooding, and they had a problem with the foundation.
Yes.
And that was apparently very costly, and they had to spend several thousands of dollars to repair this. So the agent called you and said, "Hey, who's responsible for fixing this basement?
Right.
My client no longer owns this. They didn't do it on purpose. What happens?"
Right. So the contract now has language in it that talks about insurance coverage during this post-settlement occupancy period. So first of all, as long as the seller is not responsible for the damage that happens to the house, so they didn't do anything like, I don't know, maybe start running the outside pipes because we had nice weather and then forget to or winterize them back again, and then the pipes burst and it floods, or, their kid stuffs toys down the toilet, so it causes...
It would never happen.
No. Or, the dishwasher breaks, like who's responsible for that? So the contract wasn't really clear about that. Now they've added in some additional language about whose insurance is primary, meaning first on the hook, and then whose is secondary.
Okay.
So I always tell buyers and sellers in this scenario, you've got to make sure you talk with your insurance company or agents, let them know, hey, this is what's happening, what kind of coverage do I need? And then if there is, this is an act of God. So if there's an act of God that happens and it's not due to anything the seller did, then the buyer's insurance will be first and then the seller's insurance. And of course, your seller, you're going to want to make sure your insurance covers your personal property too, because if that gets damaged, you want to make sure you can get that replaced.
All right. So in summary, people should be looking at their contracts, actually reading them.
Yes.
And also be in touch with their insurance companies if they're doing these post-occupancy settlement agreements.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Indeed.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a great day, guys.
Bye.